Have you ever watched someone you love disappear? Not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece, until the woman you thought you knew was gone before you ever thought to look? Have you ever wondered how a man can smile at a charity gala on a Friday night and come home to break something irreplaceable before midnight? Have you ever seen a system built to protect people look the other way because the man doing the damage had the right last name, the right handshake, the right donation to the right foundation? This is the story of Audrey Coles, and this is the story of what happened when the man who believed he had destroyed her found out he had only made her dangerous. Audrey was 26 when she married Rowan. No, wait, that name is taken. She was 26 when she married Desmond Hart. She had met him at a fundraising dinner in Ottawa, the kind of evening where the lighting is warm and everyone's best self shows up. Desmond was 41, a real estate developer with a reputation for turning neglected properties into profitable ones. He was tall, well-dressed, and had a way of listening that made you feel like the only person in the room. Audrey, who had grown up in a modest household in Sudbury, Ontario, her father a high school history teacher, her mother a registered nurse, had never had anyone look at her the way Desmond did that night. She told her older sister Margot. No, Margot is on the list. She told her older sister Therese about him the next morning over the phone. She said, "He's not like anyone I've ever met." Therese, who was a paralegal in Toronto and had what Audrey always called a bloodhound's instinct for trouble, had paused and said, "That can mean a lot of things, Odds." But Audrey was 26, and Desmond was attentive and generous, and within 8 months they were engaged. Within 14, they were married in a ceremony at a vineyard in Prince Edward County. The pictures were beautiful. Audrey wore a simple ivory dress. Desmond cried at the altar. People cried at things like that. The first time he raised his voice at her, they had been married 4 months. It was over something she cannot even name now. Something about the way she had stacked dishes, or forgotten to pass along a message from a contractor. It was so sudden and so loud that she froze. And then it was over. He apologized. He brought her flowers the next day, expensive ones from the market on Elgin Street. He held her face in his hands and said it would never happen again. She believed him. Why wouldn't she? The first time he hit her, they had been married 11 months. She had been on the phone with Therese when he came home earlier than expected to find the apartment in what he called disorder. Her laptop open on the kitchen table, her coffee mug leaving a ring on the marble, her shoes near the door instead of in the closet. He ended the call himself, taking the phone from her hand with a calmness that should have been a warning. And then his hand moved. She stood in the kitchen for a long time after he left the room. She did not call Therese back that night. In the weeks that followed, Desmond was exceptional. He took her to Montreal for a long weekend. He told her she was the most important person in his life. He said he was under pressure from a project that had gone sideways, that it wouldn't happen again, that he was getting help. He used the word help very deliberately. It made her feel that she was watching someone try to be better, and she had been raised to believe you didn't abandon people in the middle of trying. It happened again, and again, and again. By the time they had been married 2 years, there was a pattern so embedded in their life together that she barely recognized it as a pattern. There were good stretches, sometimes weeks where Desmond was the man from the fundraising dinner, easy and generous and warm, and then something would shift, something atmospheric, and she would feel it before she could name it. A tightness in his jaw at dinner. The way he set his keys down on the counter a half-second harder than necessary. She became a reader of small signals. She learned to adjust herself in real time. She stopped wearing the earrings he said he didn't like. She started timing dinner to his schedule rather than her own hunger. She checked her texts in the bathroom because he didn't like her looking at her phone when he was home. She made herself smaller and smaller and called it being a good wife because no one had given her a better word for it. Desmond's professional life was significant. He had a company, Hart Developments, with projects across eastern Ontario and into Quebec. He sat on the board of a children's hospital foundation. He was photographed at openings and galas. The Ottawa social world liked him. More importantly, it needed him. His donations were substantial, his network deep. When you Googled him, the results were clean. When he hit Audrey, no one photographed that. She wore turtlenecks in September. She canceled lunch with a colleague from her job at the communications firm, where she worked part-time, and said she had a migraine. She got very good at migraines. She got very good at a lot of things she had never expected to learn. Therese called every week. Audrey was careful on the phone. She had learned, not from any guide or hotline but from the slow education of living with Desmond, that certain words and certain tones created consequences. She kept her voice even. She talked about work, about a Netflix series she was watching, about whether their mother's hip was getting better. She did not talk about the bruising along her left side from a Tuesday in February, or the way she had stopped being able to eat a full meal, without wondering if Desmond would find something wrong with how she was sitting. Therese suspected something. She had said as much, once, "Audrey, I just need to know you're okay." And Audrey had said she was tired, just tired, that things were fine, that Desmond's project had been stressful and it was affecting both of them. She hated herself for saying it, but she didn't yet know how to say the other thing. What changed was not a single moment. That's what people get wrong about these situations. They want a single moment, a line crossed, a door slammed. What changed for Audrey happened more quietly than that. It accumulated. She had been married to Desmond for 3 years when she learned she was pregnant. She was standing in the bathroom of their apartment on Clemo Avenue on a Tuesday morning in March, looking at the test, and her first feeling was not joy. Her first feeling was a clarity so cold it shocked her. She thought, "This child cannot grow up here." The thought arrived fully formed, like something she had known for a long time that had finally found its sentence. She did not tell Desmond, not yet. Instead she called Therese. She called her from a coffee shop on Bank Street that she had started going to on her lunch breaks. One of the only places where she could speak freely. Where there were no recording apps on her phone she hadn't installed herself. Where Desmond's awareness could not reach her. She sat at a corner table with a chamomile tea she didn't drink and told her sister everything. She started from the beginning. She talked for almost 2 hours. Therese was quiet for a long time when she was finished. Then she said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do." Therese was not a paralegal who handled family law, but she knew people who did. She knew what evidence meant, legally. She knew the difference between leaving and leaving with leverage. She understood that women who left men like Desmond Hart, men with money and profile and the social capital to make themselves sympathetic, needed to leave in a way that couldn't be undone or reframed. "You don't leave yet," Therese said. "I know that sounds wrong. But you leave now, and he controls the story. He has lawyers on retainer, odds. He has people who will make this look like a difficult wife and an ugly divorce. We need to build something he can't talk his way out of." Audrey sat with that for a long moment. "How long?" she asked. "A year," Therese said. "Maybe less, if we're smart." They made a plan. Audrey bought a small digital recorder, cash, at a shop in Gatineau, and began keeping it in the pocket of her cardigan when Desmond was home. She started photographing bruises in the bathroom with her older phone. The one Desmond didn't know she still had, keeping it inside her winter boots in the back of the closet. She wrote down dates and times in a notes app, protected by a password Desmond had never seen, backing it up through an email account he didn't know existed. She was methodical about it. Therese had connected her with a family lawyer named Helena Driscoll in Toronto who specialized in domestic violence cases and had, over 20 years, handled situations exactly like this one. Helena told Audrey what mattered and what didn't. Medical records if she could get them. Photographs with timestamps. Audio where possible. Anything that created a record Desmond's team couldn't erase. The goal, Helena told her on a call she took from a bathroom stall at a coffee shop, is to make sure that if he tries to control the narrative after you leave, the evidence already has a different story filed with the right people. Audrey started attending her regular prenatal appointments and documenting everything. The physical exams, the conversations with her obstetrician about stress, the times she had to explain a bruise as a fall. Her doctor, a woman named a woman named Dr. Katsaros, who had calm eyes and the particular attentiveness of someone who had heard gaps in stories before, asked her once, directly during a 12-week appointment, "Audrey, is there anything happening at home that I should know about?" It was the first time anyone in an official capacity had asked that question. Audrey had not cried in front of anyone in so long that she wasn't prepared for what happened. Her throat closed. She nodded. Dr. Katsaros handed her a tissue and said, very quietly, "You don't have to tell me everything today. But I'm going to start documenting everything I can see, and you should know that this file is yours, and I will do whatever is within my power to help you when you're ready." She said that. A doctor in Ottawa said that. Audrey went home that afternoon and wrote it down. She wrote down the date, the time, the exact words. She sent a copy to Therese. There was an evening in October, 8 months into what she and Therese privately called the gathering. That was the worst. Desmond had lost a significant contract, a mixed-use development in Gatineau, that had been contested for environmental reasons, and that his team had ultimately failed to push through. He came home at 10:30 on a Thursday night and Audrey was already in bed, which he said was rude, that she should have been awake to ask him how his day was, that she clearly did not understand what he needed from her. The argument escalated in a direction that had become familiar. She did not fight back. She had learned, early on, that fighting back changed the quality of what happened next. What happened that night was bad enough that she went to the hospital the next morning, while Desmond was at a breakfast meeting downtown. She told the triage nurse she had fallen down the stairs. She understood, even in the moment, the specific shame of saying those words. She understood that the nurse likely knew exactly what she was hearing. The nurse documented everything. The hospital social worker came and sat with her for 40 minutes. Audrey gave her name. She said she was not ready to file a report, but she wanted the record to exist. The social worker said, "This record exists, and it will still be here whenever you are ready." Audrey called Therese from the hospital parking lot, sitting in her car with the heat on because it was mid-October in Ottawa and already cold. She did not cry. She had passed through the part of this that made her cry. What she felt now was something else, a kind of precision, an almost mechanical clarity. "I think we have enough," she said. Therese said, "Let me call Helena." The plan was not complicated, but it required timing. Helena had assembled a case file that Therese described, when she finally saw it, as extraordinarily complete. Medical records, photographs, audio recordings that were legally obtained and admissible under Canadian law, a statement from Dr. Katsaros, the hospital record from October, a written account, dated and notarized, from a neighbor on Clemo Avenue who had heard things through the wall, and had never known what to do about it, and had been waiting, quietly and with guilt, for someone to ask. Audrey's departure was scheduled for a Thursday in November, when Desmond would be in Montreal for a 2-day meeting with a development partner. The Wednesday evening before, Desmond sat across from her at dinner, and talked about the Montreal project and what it could mean for the company. He seemed almost like himself that night. The version from the fundraiser, the one who had made her feel seen. She watched him and thought about the fact that she knew him now, in a way that made the early version look like a stranger. She had lived inside the real shape of him for 4 years. She passed him the breadbasket, and said something about hoping the meeting went well. She did not tell him that the next morning, while he was on the highway to Montreal, she would be carrying 3 bags to the car she had arranged to have parked 2 streets over. She did not tell him that Therese would be waiting at a house in Toronto she had never heard of, where Audrey and the baby she was now 7 months carrying would stay while the legal process began. She said goodnight at 10 o'clock and let him kiss her cheek. She did not sleep. Therese had asked her to send a text when she was in the car. One word, northbound. Audrey sat in the car on the side street at 7:15 in the morning in the November dark, bags in the back seat, and typed the word. The drive to Toronto was 4 hours and 45 minutes. She stopped once, at a Tim Hortons outside Kingston, and ate a breakfast sandwich she barely tasted and sat in the parking lot with her hands on the steering wheel, and understood, for the first time in years, that she was making a decision no one else could reverse. Desmond called at noon. She didn't answer. He called again at 12:30, at 1, at 1:15. At 1:20 he sent a text message that said, "Where are you? I need you to call me back right now." She looked at it. She put her phone face down on the passenger seat. She drove. What followed was not easy, and she would not want anyone to believe it was. The legal process was hard. Desmond's lawyers were exactly as aggressive as Therese had predicted, and the first weeks involved motions and counter-filings, and a statement from Desmond's team, suggesting that Audrey had fabricated the abuse in order to gain leverage in a divorce proceeding. His publicist issued a careful, unsigned statement to a Toronto real estate publication, noting that certain allegations had been made against a prominent developer, and were being vigorously contested. The statement was picked up by 2 Ottawa outlets. For approximately 6 days it looked like he might be winning the narrative. Then Helena filed the evidence. The hospital record dated, with clinical observations, Dr. Katsaros' statement, the audio recordings, the photographs time-stamped, the neighbor's notarized account, a record from Audrey's workplace communications firm noting dates she had come in clearly injured, and the informal conversations 2 colleagues remembered having about her well-being. A timeline covering 41 months. Desmond's legal team requested an adjournment. The judge denied it. Within 3 weeks, 2 members of the Heart Development's board had resigned, citing concerns about due diligence in leadership oversight. The Children's Hospital Foundation quietly did not renew his board appointment. A contractor who had been in business with Desmond for 6 years terminated the relationship and, in a move that no one had orchestrated but that had its own logic, called a journalist he knew at the Ottawa Citizen. The article ran on a Thursday morning. By Friday, 2 more women had come forward, not publicly, but to Helena privately through channels Audrey had not known existed. Desmond Hart was charged with 3 counts of assault causing bodily harm. His lawyers entered a not guilty plea and announced he would defend the charges vigorously. He did defend them. For 7 months. Then, in the middle of a discovery process that his own lawyers had begun to describe, in private, as an excavation, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts. He received a sentence of 22 months in custody, plus 3 years of probation, and was ordered to have no contact with Audrey or their child. Audrey was in the courtroom the day the sentence was read. She was sitting beside Therese and holding her daughter, who had been born in a Toronto hospital in January, healthy, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, arriving in the world in the middle of a snowstorm with the kind of stubbornness her mother recognized immediately. She had named her Ren. She looked at her daughter when the sentence was announced, not at Desmond. She had looked at him enough. Ren is 2 years old now. She lives with Audrey in a house in the East End of Toronto, on a street with big maple trees that will be magnificent in the fall. Audrey went back to work full-time 8 months after Ren was born, at a different communications firm, doing work she finds genuinely meaningful. She has a colleague named Petra. No, Petra is on the list. She has a colleague named Simone, who brings her coffee sometimes, and knows a little of the story, and does not make it uncomfortable. She has a running route along the waterfront that she does 3 mornings a week, and which, she has told Therese, feels like a kind of argument. Her body moving through space freely, without measuring the air in a room. Therese comes to Toronto once a month. She sits on Audrey's couch and holds Ren, and they drink tea, and sometimes they don't say anything for a while, because some things between sisters don't need words. There is a foundation in Ottawa, small, newly incorporated, run by 2 women who connected through Helena's network, that supports women navigating the legal process of leaving abusive marriages. It is not named after Audrey. Audrey preferred it that way. She made a donation in November, on the anniversary of the morning she drove north, and she wrote a short note that went into the foundation's files. The note said something like, "The record always exists, even when it feels like no one is keeping it. Keep yours." She is 30 years old. She is not the woman who stood frozen in the kitchen on Clemau Avenue and did not call her sister back. She is something else now, something she does not have a clean word for, which feels about right, because the most important things rarely do. Her daughter woke her up this morning at 6 a.m. by patting her face with both hands, very seriously, as though conducting an assessment. Audrey opened her eyes and looked at her. Ren looked back. Outside, it was early spring in Toronto, and the light was doing what it does in that city in late April, showing up through the window at a slant, making everything in the room look like it was waiting to begin.